So I decided to make a variant of a classic bodybuilding style Vince Gironda inspired workout using basic equipment that you'd have at home for bodyweight training as well as resistance bands. So one of the big things is core training. We're going to be doing a lot of work with the transverse abdominis, so basically ab vacuums are one of the starting points. So what you're going to want to do is you basically want to put your hands down and you're creating tension through your core. And the point of this is just so that your abdominal wall has something to push against as you're breathing in and out. So then you're going to try to maximally exhale and kind of crunch down, hold it for a few seconds, inhale and repeat. So I'll show you how to do it. I'll show it from the side. So again, you're just trying to create that vacuum with a little bit of tension added to it as well. I want to be taking what you've just practiced from those abdominal vacuums, and then you're going to apply them to other exercises. So, first one I'll be showing. This at first looks similar to a crunch, just bringing your body up like this, but there's two major differences. The first one is you're actually bringing your legs inward as you're crunching forward. And the second is the control of the breath. So with all of these core exercises, you're trying to maximally exhale and kind of do that abdominal vacuum at the bottom to really engage the core more deeply. So I'll demonstrate here. You're basically going to want to kind of exhale as you crunch and contract, and then inhale as you relax, and do that for several reps. So you want your feet out so that there's always resistance. Never have them just touch the ground. With this, try to keep your lower back flat on the ground. And then we're going to do knee to elbow raises, which are more for the obliques, but it's kind of a similar concept. So you're keeping your back flat on the ground. In this one, you actually want your feet and hips to be very close to the ground. But you're kind of doing a side crunch, but you're bringing your leg and your elbow to each other. So I'll demonstrate now. And again, you're exhaling and inhaling and making sure to completely evacuate your lungs when you're exhaling. So. So now we're going to go ahead and move into the leg training section. The first thing we're going to be doing is a bodyweight equivalent of what's just called metabolic squats. You may be aware of the super squats program or the breathing squats, 20 rep squats. And so it's a similar idea here where, in this case, the squats are not necessarily the actual main part of the workout for your legs, but the idea is that you're getting fatigued enough and warmed up enough that it then allows you to get a lot more out of the second exercise. So normally you would just do this with a back squat or a front squat, but in this case, I'm going to go ahead and just do it with Cossack squats, so you're getting the one leg thing. And so here what you want to do, it's similar to a pause, but it's kind of a pause under tension that's very long. So you go down like normal, and then you take 2 deep breaths while you're still down under tension, and then you go back up. And then you just do that for pretty high repetitions with the goal of just getting a lot of metabolites into your legs. And the nice thing with this is because it's not really the main bulk of the leg movements, you don't actually have to go that heavy with it. So you can get away with fairly moderate weights and still get this metabolic effect because it's fatiguing so much. Here we go. 1, 2, and then up. So notice I'm not relaxing at the bottom. I'm trying to keep my quad tense, so. Already you can kind of see I'm getting a little bit pumped up, a little bit fatigued. I'll do a bit on the other side, so. And up. So again, you never want to relax your legs. You never really want to give them a chance to catch a break because you're just trying to build up that fatigue and those metabolites in your legs. So then after this is usually where you go into the exercise that is really more the focus of the, I guess the quad training in this case. And so generally that is either a foot elevated, front squat variation or a sissy squat variation. So in this case, I'm going to be demonstrating a variant of the Gironda sissy squat, which is essentially a combination of a normal sissy squat with a front squat. And typically you would do that on a platform where you could elevate your heel, and that basically just like allows your center of gravity to be shifted forward a little bit. So then you're not really worrying about wobbling or balance. You can just focus on actually like moving the legs. So this variation is going to be a little different. Instead of just having a barbell loaded in a front squat position, have my heels elevated, I'm doing it on flat ground, and I'm going to be using the wall behind me to support it. So I'll show you how we do it. So first, you're just getting into a deep sissy squat. This is nothing different. But then at the bottom, whoops, right, let me try to get the balance on this. This is why you usually just want to elevate your feet. But at the bottom, you are shifting into a front squat. And then as you go back up, you actually are driving your hips forward and then straightening out. And so as much as you can, you're using your quads and your hip flexors with a little support from the glutes just to kind of keep that position. So I'll show it from the side. So typical sissy squat, and then down, and then back up. So I'll show it again, just the full one, full speed. Okay. Balance. The calf movements are pretty standard. Deep stretch. Really the only thing that's different is being very careful about where you're putting your pressure on your foot. So I know in the case of Vince, what I like to do is, he really just was like about the deep stretch. And I actually like to turn my heels outward a little bit. And then as I go up, I'm bringing them together. So what you're doing now is you're actually working with the bone structure of your ankles just to get a really deep stretch. And you're also not really emphasizing one part of the calf to the detriment of the others. So I have pretty bad calf genetics, but I find that these are really helpful at addressing that. So again, just a bent leg version, same kind of deal. Whoops. And the further you lean forward, the deeper the stretch and the harder the leverage is on the calves. Usually it would just be, a classic hamstring curl for the hamstrings. I like these because you don't really need a high degree of skill, unlike the Nordic curls and other variations. You don't have to be crazy strong to do these. Hopefully this shows up. So yeah, again, another good thing about this is the leverage is made so that when your legs are extended, it's the hardest, which is what you want. You kind of want that stretch. And then you're just bringing them up. So again, this is more about just isolating the hamstring. Your glutes will be involved to a certain degree, but you're really just pulling yourself up entirely by the strength of your hamstrings. This is another one where you could do a single leg variant, just assisted, or even unassisted. So now we're moving on to chest variations, chest exercises. So this is a really intense dip variation called the Gironda dip. Be careful with this. I've heard anecdotally that some people don't really like the internally rotated position on your shoulders. It's pretty similar to the Bulgarian dip on the gymnastics rings, except it's very intense. It's just isolating the lower chest, pec minors especially, with really intense stretch. If you're not somebody who's already very good at dipping, you can't handle weighted dips, things like that, or it just bothers your shoulders in general, probably best to avoid this and do something else. If you're someone who can handle it, but you really can't do that much intensity yet, I would recommend doing this on one of the machine-assisted dips or pull-up setups. You can do it with a normal pull-up setup. I will say one thing, this is originally done kind of on a triangle dip bar where there's basically a V shape. Maybe it's a V dip bar, I can't remember. Anyways, where it starts extremely narrow and then tapers outward. So if you find a dip bar like that, you're going to want to put yourself towards the wider end of that. But this can still be done on parallel dips. And so what you do for this one, see how my hands are internally rotated? So hands internally rotated, tuck the chin. I'm basically putting my feet forward. I'm trying to take the triceps as much out of the equation as possible. And then I'm just gonna breathe in and out. And just one of these is really hard. I mean, a lot of people aren't even gonna be strong enough to do a single one. And that's totally okay. I would just recommend doing it on the machine assisted at that point. And another thing that's important with the chest, you want to breathe in as deep into your chest as possible while you're at the bottom, just to get a little bit more of your stretch in your rib cage and your pecs. So, all right, here we go. Ooh, that's intense. So this next exercise is a bit more accessible to most people than the Gironda dip will be. You are going to elevate your hands on something. Like in this case, I'm going to be using, I like to use kettlebell handles just because, or handles and kettlebells just because I have them laying around. But parallettes work as well. If you're a crazy person, you could use rings if you really want an extra challenge. And so what you're doing here is this is basically a variation of an extended range of motion push-up where you, at the bottom, are folding your legs. And the reason you're doing that is to change the leverage so that at the bottom you're getting an extremely intense stretch on the pec musculature. So there are definitely people, if you're a really strong pusher, who are going to be able to do this with weight or for high reps. But for most people, myself included even, I consider myself a pretty strong at calisthenics, and this, a few of these is more than enough. I can only do about 8 or so. So you're going to start essentially in a normal position for a push-up, right? I would use something more sturdy for your feet. This is just a good height for the demo. So kind of standard, plank position. But then as you're going down, you're folding your feet in. You want to make sure that your knees are not touching the ground at the bottom. And there's a huge stretch. And you want to breathe in at the bottom just to get that stretch even more. And then back up like a piston. Now we're moving on to everybody's favorite, biceps, basically drag curl variations. So the idea of the drag curl is just that normally you would do this with a barbell. You're basically keeping it as close to your body as possible. As you can see, there's really not that much shoulder involvement relative to the amount of bicep contraction. And so the key here is making sure you are going through the entire range of motion, that you're not curving out like a normal curl, and that you're going all the way to the top. So basically you come up, you just want a little stretch on the biceps. I like to put them a little bit forward, instead of back here, but it's up to you. It's really whatever's comfortable. And then keep them close and tight to the body, up, up, up. And then at the last part, you want to make sure you're still using your biceps as much as you can. You bring it up here. So don't really shove it at the front of your deltoid. Just try to use your biceps and then back down. In terms of back exercises, most of the old literature I've seen actually just recommends a standard, 45-degree hyperextension, or just a, back extension that's the 90 degrees. If you don't have access to those machines, this is another option as well. I'm just looping this here because I can't really put it on my feet that easily and still have them spread. You kind of want to have your hips almost in a horse stance. The idea is just to really be able to get low, full range, and through here. And so, the intention is great for this. You can either kind of hold it like a deadlift, or you can hold it closer to your body. This is easy to do with a dumbbell in a goblet squat position. Or you can loop it over your back. It's really just whatever's most comfortable. I prefer to get them almost in a goblet position. So you want to make sure there's enough tension, and then you want to go down to the point where you're actually bending forward a little bit, and then raise back up. And this is just to isolate the low back and hips a little bit. You also get a good mobility challenge. It's similar to the pancake position. So I flex a little at the bottom forward as it kind of naturally pulls me in that position. And then I arch a little bit at the top. And you want to have it pulled tight enough that you're still getting tension throughout the motion. So in this case, it's a little bit forward, just so that I'm actually having a load on the bottom. So these are just seated variations of lateral raises and then rear delt flies. So you're going to be able to use this with a really light band. I personally at the gym will do this with like 10-pound dumbbells. So this time you want the weight in front of you. So I would just use my feet. You want your feet together, but I would just put it towards the front of my toes so that I've got the weight pulling me forward. You want to do middle of the hands. Make sure you've got tension at the bottom. That's a biggie. And then, so what you do is you're really just trying to get your delts into the stretch position. You fold forward here, exhale. Then for the lateral raise, you're going to inhale and raise up. It's a lot harder than it looks. So, and you want your pinky, whoops. You want to have your pinky a little higher than your thumb. And so then for the rear delt focused version, you actually start in essentially the same position, right? The difference is that when you go up, you'll see. So I'm still kind of keeping myself folded forward and only leaning back slightly. Normally you would just do this on an incline bench and then put a t-shirt over it so you're not just getting a big marking on your forehead. What this allows you to do is to bend over more than normal without really worrying about toppling over or balance. Breathe in. Yeah. As you can probably tell, breathing is really important with all these. You want to make sure you're not doing neutral, but you've got a little bit of a flare just to engage the lats better. Illustrate the difference. So here we've got just kind of a normal pull up, and then we've got a Gironda. So you want to arch like crazy. So just standard and Gironda. Oh. So Raider pulls are actually usually done on a stationary kind of pole sort of thing, but I feel fine just doing them on a band. So this is, they call it a chest expanding move. There used to be a lot of stuff that's kind of pseudoscience about expanding the rib cage. Basically people thought that with weight training you could really expand the volume of your rib cage. But we now know that's not really that plausible, because it's actually strengthening the intercostal muscles of your ribs, building them up, and so then you're creating the illusion of a larger chest. Well, I don't really think you're changing your connective tissue or your bone structure that much. It's just not really that realistic, particularly after you've exited puberty. Okay, so what you would do is you want to pull down and in, engaging your chest. You want to make sure not to crunch. You're not trying to use your abs. And so, similar to an ab vacuum, you're just kind of creating that downward tension so that the muscles you're using for breathing have something to push against. Again, you want your hands close together, so squeeze together like a hug and then push down. And do not use the abs. So it's going to look like probably I'm arching my back, but that's just my rib cage inflating. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking as deep a breath as possible, and that's going to stretch my rib cage out. And so this is going to feel weird. It's going to feel almost like you're breathing against resistance. That's basically the idea, is that you're using the structures of your body to create that resistance that you have to press out against. Use these with something stationary, so I can actually do it with this as well, or a pole, something that you can just kind of clamp in a little and do. Make sure your arms are straight out in front of you. Not reaching, but just straight out. So don't think that I forgot. The goal with these is it's just a kneeling overhead extension. So you want to have your shoulder and your tricep cocked back as much as possible. And then bring it back. It's just really about that deep stretch under load. You want to feel like your arm is getting stretched to the max. It should be uncomfortable. Not painful, but uncomfortable. Your elbows may take a little bit to get used to that. So again, kneel. And the point of the kneel is just to get an even deeper stretch. Obviously this is mainly designed for cables, but bands will substitute just fine. And then we've got a variant of the tricep pushdown, kind of the classic. The main difference here just being that you're actually going to flare your elbow a little bit. And that's just to kind of get a little bit more stretch on the tricep and take other movements, other muscles that can kind of help you cheat it out of the movement. So it's not a crazy flare, but you just want to not have them tight. You want a little gap, basically, like a few hand weights. Then from here, you just go all the way down. Oh, other thing, I almost forgot. You want to bend your knees. And again, that's just so that other musculature in your body is not really able to assist that much. So you're going to feel the difference. It's still the lateral head, but it's just kind of in a different position. So, well, that's it. I hope you enjoy this and leave some comments below.